So, hey guys, this is my first of hopefully a consistent series where I'll be talking about agency growth. So, my name is Deepak Shukla. Thank you guys that have joined me today. I run a company called Pearl Lemon. We've been going about 6 years. Our revenue, if you was fluctuated anything from in pounds from as low as £50,000 up to £150,000 a month. That's now one of several businesses that I run. We have a catering company that does probably maybe closer to £200,000 a year and kind of growing. We have a legal practice that does a couple of £1,000s a month, an accountancy practice, and there's other business units that we're growing out and we're kind of venturing out into other areas. So that's my background. That's what I've been doing for the last 6 years. And of course, outside of that, as you know, I'm a fan of running. I like ultra marathon running. So I've got into the space of doing 100-mile runs and yeah, it's in terms of the business that I run, we're decently profitable. We do anything from 30, in some cases up to 50% margins. And I'm here to help share with you, the experiences or insights that I've gained and how possibly I can help you guys. So look, I'll go through today some based upon the questions that you've asked. Thank you, Shiva. Thank you, Ray. And thank you, Harris. I'll go through some of the finer principles that I think that we as agency owners can focus upon. So that there's several buckets that fundamentally are pivotal when it comes to building out your business. So the first bucket that most people at some point focus upon is the acquisition of leads. So let's just talk about that bucket very quickly, and we'll go on to talk high level today about different areas. But we'll first of all begin by talking about the aspect of lead generation. So I think that you see it bounded about in a lot of video content that's out there today. And I think that it is more important than ever. I think that people still don't focus upon it enough. And I think that it's phenomenal the amount of long-term return on investment that you can get based upon initially producing this one thing. And this is the key. This one thing doesn't need to be consistent, but it needs to exist. So we're in the game of talking about 0 to 1. So what will happen is that most people would typically talk to you, for example, and you guys will know it as agency owners. You can run a cold email campaign. You can run a LinkedIn automation campaign. You can hire an outsourced cold caller to power dial and cold call. You can work on, for example, inbound SEO. So all of you, to some degree, have different levels of sophistication, whether theoretical or actual, of how to generate leads. So what's interesting is that all of the answers are out there to some degree, but people aren't getting the return on investment that they necessarily want from any one of those channels. So there's one fundamental to begin with that sits underneath all of that, and it's practical, but not enough people do it. And that is, to a degree, what I'm doing right now, which is the production of content that's high value, that demonstrates a kind of offer and insight and humanness that you can put out there. And already, if you think about it in terms of 0 to 1, and there's a reason that I use that context, to go from 0 to 1 to produce cold email, there's almost no barrier to entry. People these days can do ChatGPT. They can use any kind of cold email tool. You can build things and you can spin up and launch a campaign. It doesn't distinguish you because the value differentiation isn't there. Okay. Now, people often, when it comes to content, talk about distribution and the challenges of distribution. But your content, much like, for example, Facebook, which is where I put this link out to, your content will always be famous in the eyes of a few. And when you run outreach and then people choose to do due diligence and then follow up, people will look at your content. And actually, the ability, for example, to talk at length, and again, I'm going to go into levels and layers when it comes to content, okay? Because content is really about the provision of huge value. It is not about tweeting or putting out a shitty status update that's a Giphy or a repost of something that Steve Jobs said or Donald Trump wrote about or Alex Hormozy talks about. It is an actual production and communication of real value. And doing that inherently is a little bit challenging. And also then doing it at length in another way is also a way to distinguish yourself. So what you want to do when you're talking about 0 to 1 is the 0 to 1 to begin with is the production of high quality content. because it separates you. Because already you go into a separate bucket of people that do produce content. And again, the challenge with that is, of course, the production of quality content. And to produce quality content, you have to have something that's actually adding value that's unique to say. Because the people that make buying decisions, especially when it comes to the world of big ticket, so if you're selling anything that carries a several $1,000 ticket, and that's really, as agency owners, typically what we're in the business of, because it's depending upon how you productize your business, and some companies do it, of course, where you can sell a $99 a month service and there's less barriers to entry. But if you want to sell big ticket, the biggest ticket that I've sold currently, and it's not big, but by some means it is big. The biggest tickets that we've sold is 20 to 25,000 pounds a month, one client, right? So that's then a significant amount of money over across the course of a year. And that's been through Ascension, but that's been through initially the hook has been the provision of creating great content, and distribution is secondary to the production of content. And people often put one in front of the other. And what's interesting is that people do that also when you think about cold email, when you think about LinkedIn. People focus on the distribution of the message, and then that's about the technology medium that you use. And then that becomes about, well, okay, I can use whatever the latest and greatest tool is, and I can load up as many emails as possible or as many LinkedIn messages as possible. But these aren't separators. These aren't the things that will win you the $5,000 ticket. Because what's interesting, and here's the thing that's interesting, to build a $1 million business, to build a $2 million business, if you think about it, you don't need too many $5,000 clients. So volume isn't actually the answer. Because if you think of yourself as being a $5,000 ticket potential prospect, what kind of messaging are you going to respond to? And what quality of judgment do you make when it comes to buying decisions? And where does that begin? And what ordinarily happens is that if you're in a space where you can, for example, produce such a quality and body of content, that probably means that you might be at some level halfway decent at what you do. And that probably means that you can at some level get case studies. And that probably means that you can at some level get reviews. And these are all of the markers that if you are a business owner that has reached some level of success that allows you to afford the ability to make consistent buying decisions at that level, there's markers that you look for, that we all as individuals look for. Individuals are, of course, bigger than brands, but people don't really understand, I think, what that constitutes in terms of the provision and production of content. I'm British Indian, right? And I get a lot of people in India that follow me. And one of the biggest challenges I see in the Indian subcontinent, and it's not just in the Indian subcontinent, by the way, it's agencies in general. As soon as you can put yourself into a place where you can say, look, here's a 10-minute, 20-minute, 2-hour webinar that I put out about different segments of the marketplace, you already separate yourself in terms of quality of production and quality of content. And remember, the reason I talk about quality, because if it's quality, it'll stand the test of time even 2 years from now. Much like we talk about, for example, the realm, and what's interesting, if you think about this as a fundamental, this is meant to be the principal point, of course, that relates to inbound lead generation, because it's about producing amazing blogs. It's about producing amazing content. But again, where all of that falls down, and this is the irony, because a lot of people will come to you and they'll say, great, build an inbound lead flow. So do SEO, build an outbound lead flow through lead generation, right? And this is what's interesting. The tactics when it comes to platforms always change according, let's say, to the algorithm or according to the new tools. So the new updates on email deliverability, there's new updates on the new LinkedIn automation tool that can bypass the latest limitations that LinkedIn place on your ability to message. And there's new updates based upon what you do, of course, from email, from LinkedIn, from paid media, from inbound. But what, again, can transcend, supersede, and go above all of that is quality of message and quality of communication. Because what's interesting, then you don't need to send out 1,000 emails. You don't need to send out 1,000 LinkedIn messages. If you've got a quality that's of significant enough value, you can create something that's incredibly highly leveraged, because then you have something worth talking about. And of course, that's very, very hard, because people want to put the horse before the cart. And what they want to do is say, great, let's get up, let's get set up, let's get, and again, let's get started and let's start sending out mass messages, right? And it depends what game you want to play. And there's two games. And most people don't get far out of the first game. The first game is the short game. The short game, and if you're in the short game is, I want to send out as many emails as possible. I want to talk to as many prospects as possible. But if you can surround that with such a body of content, I'd say that that's the first big space that comes to generating lead flow. And again, if you think about quality of content and think about all of the different channels, that means quality of email sent. That can mean quality of LinkedIn status updates, quality of, for example, LinkedIn posts. So I know that Ray, for example, you're talking about how would I, for example, build out potential customers that could come via LinkedIn as a platform. Then again, the fundamental doesn't change. What we all want to have within our ecosystem is like-minded people and potentially people that could do business with us. And then what all of those people need to hear is a quality of information that would lead them to perceiving you as an expert if you want to look at the model of inbound. And then even when it comes to, for example, outbound, where you send out messaging, the salesperson, and that might be you, or your sales reps, need to have, again, quality of communication. Because then what happens, the person or the company, and this happens with us, right? The $5,000 ticket agency or the $5,000 ticket client is already speaking with several different agencies that probably outside in, from a perception standpoint, are operating at the same level as you. So it's very difficult to distinguish yourself. If I Google top, for example, LinkedIn, top any service provider in any niche, you can sure as shit assume that companies number 1, 2, 3, 4, whether I approach them or they message me, are broadly saying the same thing. This is how I do lead generation. This is how I do SEO. I'll build links. I'll build money pages. I'll focus on low competition, high volume search keywords with cold email. This is everyone saying the same thing. Do you see how it's interesting when you think about it in those terms? That many people are very quick to rush to start doing outreach when they haven't built in that quality and why the content piece is so important. Why one of the reasons why I'm creating this piece of content is because it takes a little bit of time to understand true levels and layers of differentiation. Because again, for longevity, you've got to be so resoundingly different if you, of course, want to build a company of a certain size. And that's a journey that I'm still on, right? I'm still trying to figure that out. And there's people that I observe and I watch, because it's not the case that I do 10, 20, $50 million a year. But it's interesting when I look at it to observe all of the people that are blowing past me, all of the people that are achieving certain levels. There's this distinction. So there's several guys that I'm following and I'm watching. A simple good example of it is Ryan Stewart. Ryan Stewart is an SEO agency owner who does $50 million a year. Then there's Alex Hormozy, who you may have heard of. He's a business guru. He's called the Mr. Beast of business. And there's countless examples of people that I see that have come up after me, come up before me, and there's a consistent theme that I do see. And what's interesting is it was a theme that I started for several years, and then I stopped about 3 years ago, that I decided to restart again. And there's a good book that you can read upon it. It's called The Slight Edge. Okay. So what I did in the first 2 years of my business, 2 to 3 years, I went on as many podcasts as I could to talk about whatever it was and is that I knew about the things that relate to growing a business. And that became a significant part of me being able, interestingly, to detach myself from the sales process and allow me to replace myself, because the videos began to speak for me, thus allowing my salespeople to do less in sales calls, because the people that were already part of the pipeline had been primed because they'd been watching a lot of content that related to our niche online. And then what happened, and this is what, if you read The Slight Edge, I think it's by a chap called Tim Olson, but he says one of the most common things that I see that's ironic about business owners when it comes to lead generation and growth is that as soon as they become successful, they stop doing the very thing that made them successful in the first place. They change because of this role to, for example, this desire to adapt, when actually what you might benefit from is doing the same thing but going deeper. Does that make sense? Like doing the same thing, but doing it at a higher level. So what I used to do to carry on that narrative, I used to go onto other people's podcasts, be an hour long, great, amazing. And they would over time disappear down YouTube, down Google, down the SERPs. What I didn't do was I didn't carry any of that value on platforms that I owned and operated. They weren't my platforms where I had control. I didn't produce, for example, 1 to 2 hour pieces of content on my own channels. I didn't do any of that. And what's interesting about all of you as agency owners or business owners within your respective niches is that you've got this huge body of content in here, right? Things that you just know through the work that you've done. And when you then build a body of content that you publicly communicate and disperse and distribute. And again, there's all these questions, right, about my communication style, my communication skills, what medium should I communicate on, all of this stuff. It's irrelevant. The important thing is doing the thing. And then as a consequence of consistently doing the thing over time, we all achieve a level of competency. And you can pick your medium again. But the important thing is doing the thing because, again, when I think about the things that have closed deals for the team, people have found my videos where I fought Muay Thai. People have found my video on a hair transplant. People have watched, of course, my business videos. And don't get me wrong, there's many things that I've done incorrectly, inappropriately. But the point is, the provision and production I've already put into content, which hasn't been sustained, it's been intermittent, has amplified the lead flow that we have had and helped convert it. So I would say that that's the part. And again, there's two ways to approach this. There's the continuous ongoing effort, but then there's also the 0 to 1. So 0 to 1, a simple principle of 0 to 1 is if you currently have no content, then producing some content's already going to be a massive change. It's a difference between having nothing and then having a 12-hour guide on whatever your service line is because of everything you can do with that. And if you produce real good quality content, that could be timeless. And then you can, of course, begin to insert it into your cold emails, insert it into your sequences. You can publish and repurpose that content. And again, what's good and what's great about this is this isn't a quick win, which inherently sets you up for the future because everyone is focused upon the quick win, which I say is the fast money. So one of the things you speak about, for example, Sheba, is, of course, you have had some challenges, you're looking to reinvent. And one of the things to consider or to understand is what is it that's been bad? And there's typically different buckets. It's my lead flow dried up, my projects ran dry, and they ran dry because I didn't find an upsell, I didn't find a cross sell, or I wasn't able to deliver. And it's typically a combination of these things, right? And probably not all of them are for the scope of this call. But what I would say is that, and this is one of the things that's really interesting. A lot of people that I met, as I say, as I've come up, and my any success I've had is it is what it is. But as I've got a bit better at the agency game, I've begun to enjoy running an agency more and more because time, investment, and continuous incremental improvement is a big part of it. Okay, so when it comes to, and guys, if you have follow-up questions when it comes to leads, please put them into the chat. But that ironically or counterintuitively is the big first piece, I think, that's so important when it comes to the generation of leads, because actually it begins with the production of great and quality content, because then you can use that as a scalable mechanism to distribute across all of those mediums. Now I say all of those mediums, one of the important elements, and this is where we come to the kind of second bucket, and we will come to delivery, Sheba. One of the second buckets is determining a platform that can deliver you the outsized return. And the platform that you get an outsized return tends to be different for different people. So what practically what do I mean by that? Some people get all of their inquiries through cold email. Some people do really well through paid media. Some people, of course, are just starting out, so you've yet to determine your platform. And Alex Hormozy talks about this. So does Grant Cardone, actually. But I like the way that Alex Hormozy summarizes it. He talks about this concept of more, better, new. So what people often don't do is they don't do more, much, much, much more of the very thing that makes them successful or generates some inquiries in the first place. Okay, so a simple example, and this is where, of course, the volume part, people, and this is why I spoke about content before I spoke about volume. Okay, because people go for volume before they go for content, but the creation of quality content inherently forces you to slow down because the production of that content takes time. And the production, for example, of a even 10-minute podcast, a 1 hour webinar, and it's different, of course, for different people, but a 2 hour piece of content, it takes time to put that together. And the time to deliver the value within that will inherently force you to slow down, and that will tend to improve any volume that you then apply to that content once you get some feedback from the market based upon that content. So that's why, because Hormozy talks about more better new when it comes to $100 million leads. But that's the only caveat that I add is huge investment into the production of quality content, whatever platform you choose. Okay. So for Ray, you were mentioning, for example, LinkedIn. Sheba, maybe yours is inbound. Everyone has a different platform. Really, really invest in having amazing content on that platform, and then of course scaling. Now people will do things concurrently, so you'll do them in parallel. You'll see I'll do scale and you do volume, but just don't negate volume. Don't negate scale. Don't negate quality whilst you look at scale. So we've spoken about content, we've spoken about quality of content. I would say being consistent, of course, with content, and I say this to myself as much as I say it to you, you will so quickly distinguish yourself if, for example, another example would be Benjamin Hardy when he was promoting a book launch that he had. He's an author in the personal development space. He did 250 podcasts in less than 3 months on other people's channels to promote and publish his content. And if we think about content as a form of lead generation, and it's a great piece of content, right? And again, think about it. What we're optimizing for is not breadth of exposure, and this is where people think about this. It's not breadth of exposure, okay? It's depth of exposure. So we're optimizing for the long view. The long view are the people that spend a load of time on your content, a load of time on your profile, a load of time staying on your status updates. And that typically tends to be the person who's much closer to making a higher power buying decision. That'll be Ray, your Fortune 500 companies that stalk you unknowingly, or the marketing directors at that company, or the procurement directors on LinkedIn for 4 months, and then they reach out to you. It will be those types of people, okay? And quality of content relates to depth. Depth, okay? And this, again, Sheba, relates again to the delivery, right? Because the big problem with a space like marketing that's unregulated is that people go so fast that they negate quality because there's no regulation. And people just do, but frankly, stupid shit all the time. And they don't think about things carefully enough to be like I don't get it. It's a service that people as a business owner they're so widely used, but there's no regulation attached to quality of service, quality advice, what you can say, what you can't say, and you can't. And I say this all to say that it's great for those people that care about quality of what they do, but it really can then become harmful because you can find yourself in positions that you're not prepared for, which is of course great to some degree, but it also means that you've not got the necessary hours and man hours put in. So that's again why the mechanisms, let's say, how to expand your LinkedIn limits, how to do this cool new thing with the they're all timely tactics that relate to a certain point in time. But the timeless tactic is to produce incredibly high quality content. So you want to be the Shakespeare of your niche. That's what you want to be. You want to be the guy who produces content that can stand the test of tools, that can stand the test of algos. And the problem with a lot of automation tools is that they're designed to actually make us stupid, but they serve the lowest common denominator, right? So they don't increase, they increase the overall quality, but they do nothing for the top tier people, because at the top tier, people are being really intentional with their messages. And this is where, of course, then you get into the world of personalized looms, personalized audits, individual messaging, and you'll find very few companies that are prepared to put in that level of work, which is why it's interestingly an easy way to actually change and make yourself unique. Because if you're going after the $10,000 ticket, there's far fewer of those people, and they need a very different kind of messaging. And that's where, again, if we go back to this whole cycle, 100 days of content, put out 30 minutes of content every day for 100 days, and you'll already be in a class of 1%, because so few people, so few people are actually able to do anything like that. And that quality of content will have a lifeline of a couple of years, potentially even more, depending upon the quality of the content that you produce. So some content that I've got, for example, I've done 3 TEDx talks. One of them was at Cambridge, and it came during that era where I was doing a lot of outreach and I wanted to get onto podcasts. I ended up doing a couple of TED talks and TEDx talks, to be specific. And without me knowing it at the time, but that content probably made me about $500,000, because that was what people took to say, this is the company we're going with, because I don't know SEO or I don't know lead generation, but I know TED. And therefore, I trust Deepak. And he's got something that is significant in that marketplace that differentiates him. So that's why I bang on and on about the content side of it. Okay. So let's now, with that in mind, continue to talk about the actual delivery side of it. But I'll open it up to you guys. Are there any more questions specifically about, let's call it content/lead generation, that anyone would like to ask? Feel free to just turn your mic on or write something in the chat. I'll take either comments.
Can I go, Deepak?
Yeah, of course, Shiba, go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll just quickly brief that. I parallelly run a training business, and where I teach people how to be profitable with meta ads. Okay. So it's a 7 days program. People come pay, let's say 8,000, 10,000 bucks. And that became like a lead magnet for me, because that is where they interact with me for 7 days. There is no webinar or something. It's a direct selling I used to do through ads.
Yeah.
Through ads, they come, they find it relevant. And after attending the classes, few of them used to turn as a client for me. Okay. And slowly people started, I also started doing content on Insta, though I could not do after 75 days. We did consistently for 75 days, 2 years back.
Okay.
Now I repent why I stopped. Now, what has happened over last 2 years is getting clients was easy for me, because every time, like, and we used to do lead generation through Google and Meta. And we're following a process, and I was able to close good type of clients. Like, in Indian context, they were relatively medium or high quality, high ticket, you can say. But I faced problem with the delivery, so I need some help. And now I'm going to say that I can easily still get clients, but I'm not confident about getting a team which can deliver. Because people come by seeing my face in the meeting, in the sales call.
Of course.
Whatever, the way I explain, they enroll to that. But many of them go back because they say that whatever you promise, whatever we could see, that is not fulfilled.
Yeah.
And I could not replicate myself. That is a common problem. That is a common problem that early stage entrepreneurs face. Early stage agency owners, to be specific. So that is where I'm stuck. So I'm in a crossroad whether I should do consulting only or go back to agency model, and I'm in a crossroad.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that, Shiba. Okay, amazing. So who else here has delivery challenges that they want to discuss? Just +1 in the comments if you want to talk about the delivery, whether it relates to yourself or the team that you build and operate. because that's a delivery question. So we'll come to that. Does anyone have a question related specifically to lead generation that I want to ask? Cool. All right, amazing. Let me do this then. So look, my closing comments with lead generation before we move to that question and those areas specifically. There's lots of tactics, and the tactics are important, but the tactics are timely. What's timeless is the creation of quality content, and then you can apply that to the tactics. And it's an easy way to separate yourself. If you produce an abundance of great content, then if the content is inherently fantastic, as evidenced by Shiba when he was able to deliver about his consulting business, how to launch a profitable meta ad campaign, it's timeless to a decent degree. And that is something that if you can proliferate through the production of content, aim to be the Shakespeare of your niche. Just aim to be the Shakespeare of your niche. Have the kind of Romeo and Juliet and Hamlet and Othello type of books that stand the test of time with the content that you put out. And what you'll discover when you think about it logically, and this is, again, ironically, the inherent challenge with the delivery of meta ads, Shiba, to a degree, is that tactics aren't timeless because platforms change. And that's one of the challenges inherently with just-in-time era tools, which we will see come and we will see go, but there's something that stands above that, and that's what we're going to be discussing now when it comes to client delivery. So my takeaway is, and it's a simple challenge yourself to produce 100 days of content that's 30 minutes or more. It's really, really hard to do that without finding yourself delving into a degree of nonsense. But if you do that, you'll be able to easily distinguish yourself in the marketplace of 1,000 other agency owners, because it will give you a base to work from that's quite different to anybody else.